Now, may I request Dr. Vinod Shanbag to kindly take us through the textile sector, the journey of India's textile sector, and what potential lies between India and Vietnam to explore. So, immediately after this, we will have a short discussion, and then we can personally speak to the Ambassador Excellency and Dr. Pham that we have.
Your Excellency, thank you for this opportunity, ladies and gentlemen. Just the opening remark I have to make is that Vietnam is making great strides in the textile sector. Within textile, when we talk of the textile sector, it includes textiles and clothing. And clothing is the place where Vietnam is making giant strides. 2 decades back, the Vietnamese story was very bleak. It was just making a beginning in this sector. And somehow I had an association with that beginning. Having been an advisor, academic advisor to the institute here, which had been engaged by the government to help and support a training institute coming up in Vietnam, along with NISTI. The team designed curriculum, the team trained staff there to be able to provide the training to the Vietnamese who were to join that institution. And the team also had training delivered to faculty on a continuing basis for 2 years, as and how they learned and received experience and took them to a higher level of experience. This was 2 decades back. 10 years ago, nearly 10 years ago, Vietnam was way below. In the field of textile exports, we talk in terms of top 10. If you're not in top 10, then you're nowhere. You're there, but you're nowhere, right? So, Vietnam was not in the top 10 in any way. But one could see movement. One could see movement in the data, in the statistics. And it has been borne out now. And by what I would share with you, when we look at trade statistics, we look at markets and we look at products, and we divide markets into the major markets, which is the US as the buyer, the US market, and the EU as the buyer. And I'll just share with you how the movements are happening and what is there. Consistently, I'm giving you the story of 2017 and half of 2018. Consistently, what has been seen and observed is that Vietnam's growth rate in textiles and clothing is exceeding that of the growth rate of the world. Quite clearly, it means that it is growing faster. Its trade is growing faster, its exports are growing faster than the exports of all the world taken together. I don't think that you would be so interested to know the figures exactly, because that's not important. But if you ask me, I will share the figures. And that story is even going further up in 2018, although it is just half the year of 2018 that I'm referring to. And therefore, from being 10 years back, nowhere in top 10 and not talked about, it is today in number 6, ranked number 6. But when it comes to clothing, at the world level, it is ranked number 3. Because it doesn't really stand in any big way in the field of textiles, okay? The rank at the world level comes down to 6, but in clothing, where it actually excels, the rank goes up to number 3. And the growth rates are just too fantastic when you compare with world growth rates, as well as India's growth rates for that matter. And India's growth rates have not been too good in the textiles and clothing sector, the clothing sector particularly, in the same years that I'm referring to. How does Vietnam fare in terms of imports? Textiles and clothing imports, it ranks number 8 in the world. Here again, the growth rates are fairly okay, fairly okay, comparable with the growth rates in the world, but it doesn't import clothing because it is actually exporting clothing in a big way. It doesn't import clothing. It imports textiles, and the main import is fabric. It exports yarn. And in fact, after India, it's the second largest exporter of yarn. India is the largest exporter of yarn to the world. This is something very interesting, that the spinning industry in Vietnam is a occurrence of the very recent past. There was no spinning there earlier, under different types of provisions which the governments there have for Vietnam. But the velocity cost is far less, because from Vietnam to export to USA means just to cross the Pacific, whereas to go to Europe, it has to cross many oceans, and therefore the velocity cost is very high. As a result of that, in textiles and clothing in USA, imports, Vietnam is number 2. And that is also the case in the matter of clothing. In textiles, it's nowhere, so far as USA's imports are concerned. It's well below the top 10. The growth rates are fantastic, really fantastic. I mean, to have a double-digit growth rate in textiles, particularly when you're exporting, is a huge thing. It is really huge, because it does not happen so easily. In terms of EU imports, now you will find the difference in the ranking. It was number 2 in the USA, but number 7 in the EU. And I told you about the gradient. It faces a higher gradient in being able to access that market. That's because of the velocity costs. Despite access being there in terms of the zero duty provision. There again, it has no place so far as imports of textiles are concerned, well below the top 10, but its rank is number 6 in terms of clothing. There, USA it's number 2, and here it is number 6. The US market is still a growth market. The European market has stopped being a growth market. Okay, there are good reasons for that. Now is not the time to go into it. We are here to look at Vietnam and not Europe and USA. But the fact is that it has been harnessed well by Vietnam, exploited well by Vietnam, and then it's made itself very well positioned in the US market. Basically, when we talk of products, we talk about the fibers that are involved. Is it cotton? Is it man-made fiber? Or is it wool or silk or whatever? Vietnam is basically a cotton fiber exporter. Not fiber exporter, but cotton fiber based goods exporter. And as I told you earlier, in terms of textiles, yarn is one of the main cotton products, cotton yarn, and of course, cotton-based garments. At the world level, therefore, when it comes to textiles, the rank is number 2 for cotton, and in the US, it's ranked number 8, and in the EU, it's ranked number 10. Well, this is a snapshot of how Vietnam is growing in the field of textiles and clothing exports. There are people who keep saying that Vietnam is a big competitor to India. They're not, it's apples and oranges. They're not in the same field. So actually India and Vietnam cannot be compared. Vietnam can be compared with Cambodia. And what was happening in Vietnam a few years back is now beginning to happen in Cambodia, sir. And someday you don't know whether Cambodia could compete with Vietnam. It's a smaller country, I agree, compared to Vietnam. It has much higher, gradient, to cover. But you never know in this. Businessmen shift from one geography to another for their advantage. Right, so that's it, what I have to share with you. And if you have any questions, I'll be very happy to answer. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shanbag. Actually, you have the most important sector for any nation. Textile is such a sector, it brings revolution actually in a nation. So if you see, going back to the history, when British colonized India, the first thing they tried to do is to capture India's textile market by stopping Indian manufacturers and selling their products to India. And if you see the other story is the Bangladesh story. Bangladesh economy today is thriving with the highest, I think, textile is the sector which is creating highest employment and which is also creating a huge amount of foreign exchange earnings for the country.